Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics. First, the highlights. Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors give 2-week ultimatum to federal governments to begin implementation of all pending agreements bordering on welfare of doctors. And 9 students involved in bus mishap arrive Port Sudan as government says evacuation process continues. Plus, Senator Godswill Akpabio visits President Buhari at the villa, may not be unconnected to his interest to become the President of Senate of the 10th National Assembly. Thank you for joining us. I'm Millicent Walker here in Lagos. Now, this may not be the best of time in the nation's health sector as the national leadership of the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors, they've handed a 2-week ultimatum to the federal government starting today to commence the implementation of all pending agreements bordering on welfare of doctors with the resident doctors. Now, this ultimatum was handed down in Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital, at the end of a 3-day extraordinary national Executive Council meeting held at the Federal Medical Center in the state capital. Part of their demands is the review of the CONMES salary structure, delay in the payment of the 2023 Medical Residency Training Fund, and the immediate increment of CONMES salary structure to the tune of 200% of the gross salary of doctors. Well, they also demand 15% annual budgetary allocation for the health sector from the current 5.7% to address the infrastructure decay, among others.
NEC demands immediate implementation of the consolidated medical salary structure, domestication of the MRTA, and review of hazard allowance by all state governments, as well as private tertiary health institutions where residency training is done. NEC demands immediate commencement of payment of all salary arrears owed our members by various state governments. Notorious amongst them is Ada State. NEC resolved to issue government a 2-week ultimatum beginning from 29 April 2023 to resolve all these demands, following the expiration of which on the 13th of May 2023, we may not be able to guarantee industrial harmony in the health sector nationwide.
Meanwhile, following threats by the Nigerian doctors to embark on a nationwide strike, the Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, has expressed opposition to a bill before the House of Representatives mandating medical and dental practitioners to undergo a minimum of 5 years of service to obtain a full license. The proposal seeking to amend the Medical and Dental Practitioners Act is sponsored by the lawmaker representing Oshodi Solo 2 federal constituency, Ganiu Johnson. Senator Ngige stated that the legislator in question was right to put forward a private member's bill, a proposed law to introduce into legislature by a lawmaker who is not acting on behalf of the executive branch.
The medical doctors who are resident doctors are part of NMA.
All right.
They are young doctors in training. So if NMA is negotiating on their behalf as the parent body, because they have about 4 affiliates into the NMA. We have them, NARD, you have Consultant Medical Practitioners Association, MDCAN. You have also the General Medical Practitioners. You have another group. So there are about 4 affiliate bodies into the NMA. So what the young men are doing is in bad taste, and I've told their president, you are disrespecting the NMA. The NMA is our parent body. The president of NMA is #1 doctor in Nigeria. So what they are doing is that they're crying wolf when it's done. The bill in question I don't support it. But you will not deny that legislator is right to put a private member's bill. It's not an executive bill. Even the speaker cannot stop that bill because the man is coming from a constituency. What happens in a private member's bill in National Assembly is either from your constituents that give it to you, or it's you that authored it after having a discussion with people in your constituency, and they say, this is what we think will cure this problem. But for me, that's trying to kill an ant or a fly with a sledgehammer.
Speaking last night on our political program, well, staying with the plight of workers, for over 3 decades, since 1981, Nigeria has continued to join the rest of the world to observe the first day of the month of May as the International Workers' Day. The day, otherwise called May Day, is promoted by the International Labour Movement and to commemorate workers whose vital services keep countries and their businesses alive. Our next report looks into the plight of a Nigerian worker as they join their colleagues across the globe to mark the day.
May Day, also known as the International Workers' Day, is celebrated globally to appreciate workers who create the wealth for nations to thrive. Workers in various industries across the country also trooped out to commemorate the day, but not without a thought for the challenges they have to deal with in the workplace.
Workforce is the lifeline of the nation because it takes the workforce to build the structures, it takes the workforce to be in the hospital, it takes the workforce to be in the market. The Nigerian worker needs more than they currently get.
As of today, no Nigerian worker can effectively meet our family commitment and expenses. You cannot, to even go to work has become so difficult. The purchasing power of Nigerian worker has been depleted by galloping inflation. And the incessant increase in electricity tariff, incessant increase in transportation occasioned by fuel price hike, and everything has skyrocketed. So for ordinary Nigerian workers, it's as if Nigerian workers are living corpse.
Remuneration is another major issue of concern for the Nigerian workers. The national minimum wage stands at 30,000 naira. At the time this became a legislation, there were excitements everywhere. However, this is not the case at the moment. It has become a far cry from their wishes.
If you gain 30,000, if it's in dollar, if it's in pound, you know that's one of the strongest negotiations you can earn. But as you are earning it, and then inflation takes it over, and you devalue your naira, you know that it is now worth over $40. That's the problem.
What is being paid in some establishment will not even pay your transport to work in 30 days. But you have to eat, you have to clothe yourself, you have to live in a house. It is even worse because such wages are not even paid as are when due.
The employer-employee relationship in the public sector has never been an easy ride in Nigeria. It is one filled with lots of protests and demands for better welfare. Having to deal with basic needs like housing, health, and economic challenges has not been easy. However, the federal government believes strongly that it is doing its best to improve the plight of the Nigerian worker.
What I can tell you is that the Nigerian workers are patient. Their government also have been trying their best. The manufacturers, in spite of the harsh climate for industries, have also been trying their best, those in the private sector. I can also tell you that it's work in progress.
As Nigeria joins the rest of the world to mark this year's May Day, many Nigerian workers hope to see better working conditions and remunerations for their services.
Well, Public Affairs analyst Bethel Chimzioku joins me now as we look at the conditions facing the Nigerian worker and expectations for the incoming government. We'd like to thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, only yesterday, and we've seen today as well, the celebration of Workers' Day, and they talked about a number of issues facing the Nigerian worker. If we look at the past 1 year, not palatable, they say, for the Nigerian worker. Minimum wage stood at 30,000 naira when the law was passed in 2019, a far cry from what we're going through in 2023. How would you describe the level of difficulties? And that is also if you agree with those postulations.
It's actually very difficult for people to survive on 30,000 naira minimum wage. And that being said, you still see that some states have not been able to pay. Some state governments have been struggling to pay the 30,000 naira minimum wage.
And some states like Edo State said they've been paying higher.
Yeah, that's there. So, going forward, you see the whole challenge people have faced, especially between October and somewhere around March, before we got the judgment from the Supreme Court concerning the new Naira policy. You see a lot of issues. A lot of families went through challenges. Nobody had funds to purchase whatever they needed. Workers could not even access finances, cash, to transport themselves to work and back and all that. And then the most painful part is for those who lived in the outskirts, areas where you had no banks at all, who are also part of the civil service, who suffered untold hardship. It was something really terrible that people passed through. But going forward, I'm expecting that this new administration will do something different from what the Buhari-led administration had done. And
to think that these were policies that, members of the Buhari-led administration had and said that they were working and that they had met, some of their objectives. But only yesterday, we heard from the governor of Edo State who said the federal government may not be able to pay workers beyond next month, June. He says they would have to massively print money or remove petrol subsidy. I know that's a discussion a number of people do not want us to have.
Looking at this issue of petrol subsidy, the stories surrounding it are deeply suspicious. It's almost as if every person who wants to be president of Nigeria promises that petrol subsidy will be removed, and they come into office. The current government said the same thing to remove the Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's government. They promised that they were going to remove petrol subsidy, said a lot of things about it. They are almost away from their 8 years tenure, and they are trying to say they want to remove the petrol subsidy now. The same one you people said was the wrong thing. You said it was a scam and all that. And let's look towards what the Tinubu's led administration would bring to the table, since by law, there is nothing stopping him from being sworn in on the 29th.
Well, not that we know of, especially between now and May 29th. Some people believe that, the matter is still in court and anything can still happen.
It's less likely.
Let's talk about what you see him doing. That's the incoming administration. Some have said, it's not a Tea Party, what they will be inheriting, but what are some of the areas that they should start looking at, working on ASAP?
I think the first thing that they should focus on should be stabilizing the economy. This Naira design policy caused a lot of problems. And then security. People cannot go to their farms anymore. People are scared of going to farm. And once we cannot produce what we will eat, I checked our imports. We import a lot of things. On the scale, Nigeria was about number 6 for the countries around Africa, with Egypt as number 1, importing grains from Ukraine, Russia, and I think Latvia. People just need to go back to the farms. These food shortages we're having in this country is something that should be given priority to before it goes out of hand, if it's not ready or not already out of hand. That's my take on that.
So Nigerians are looking forward to a lot of things from the incoming administration. Mr. Ogo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, The governor of Cross River State, Professor Ben Ayade, is advising the president-elect, Bola Tinubu, to focus on micro projects that will have a direct impact on the people. Now, this, according to him, is because of the hardship in the country. Governor Ayade was responding to our political correspondent, Terry Kumi, on whether the Tinubu administration should continue with the social investment programs of the Buhari administration.
When federal government starts intervention program like Mother Comfort, a conditional cash transfer, money market, all these programs intended to bring value to the poorest of the poor. In philosophy and principle, that's the way to go, because you have to lift people from extreme poverty, which has created extreme social deviation from norm. But how impactful those have been is a subject for a full controversy, because the population is far too huge for the interventions that come. So they become insignificant and just dilute into the system.
Is there insignificance in your state?
Yes, yes. I don't know of any person who has become self-sufficient occasioned by a social welfare program of any sort. Here is my advice to Mr. President-elect. Focus on the things that bring immediate value to the citizens. Shut our doors, which is isolationism, and ignore these international community ideologies. There's a thin line between the survival of this country and a conflagration. The carrying capacity of the citizens have reached its limit. There is extreme hardship. This is what I will advise President-elect to focus on. Agro-industrial, small cottage industries that bring immediate value, create jobs for people, create value addition, and spin off poverty and take out poverty. Phase 2, before you go to heavy industries, massive projects. Because if you don't get that point right, you'll be focusing on, oh, you want to see skyscraper streets, you want to see a bustling, super beautiful. No, it's the people first.
We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll bring you the latest of Nigerians being evacuated from Sudan. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and let's take you outside our shores now to the latest following the crisis in Sudan. 9 Nigerian students who slept at the RSF checkpoint after the bus conveying them burst its tire have all arrived in Port Sudan. This latest development was confirmed by a source in Sudan's evacuees, the Sudan Evacuees Situation Room. According to him, the students joined another bus sent by the transport company, which left 9 seats for them. In Port Sudan, they met about 40 other Nigerian students, some with their families, who had made their own arrangements to leave. He says they are not from Khartoum, but from Madani, a city south of Khartoum in neighboring Jazeera state. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Diaspora Commission, NIDCAM, confirmed that payment has been concluded and paid to bus drivers conveying students from the war-torn Sudan and are set to move today, the 2nd of May. The Commission also states that the Egyptian borders are now open for evacuation of Nigerians and clearance is underway. However, some of the students who spoke to Channels Television say things are still as they are. For those at the Aswan border by Egypt, where they were refused entry since Thursday last week, the Egyptian authorities, they say, had asked that a number of conditions be met, some of which include details and schedule of the aircraft's capacity of those aircraft, a strong pledge that once the citizens depart the border, they will be conveyed directly to the designated airport, a comprehensive list of evacuees with passport numbers, valid travel documents, presence of Nigeria government officials at the points of embarkation, standby buses that will immediately convey them to the airports. Meanwhile, we understand today that Sudan's warring rivals have agreed to send representatives for negotiations, potentially in Saudi Arabia. The United Nations Special Representative in the country confirmed this, that talks would initially focus on establishing a stable and reliable ceasefire monitored by national and international observers. Now, I spoke earlier today to an immigration lawyer, Mr. Dayo Fadina, on the situation involving the evacuation of Nigerians from Sudan, as well as the surrounding borders and the challenges. Here's what he had to say. When a situation like what we're seeing in Sudan arises, what goes through your mind as to the challenges, humanitarian and otherwise?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your audience. What is truly going on right now in Sudan is, very, very terrible, catastrophic. It's a situation where this shouldn't be happening at all, but we are where we are. The fact still remains that the war is still going on, despite the fact that there have been so many ceasefires. But again, the war continues. Now, to do with the different nationals who need to be evacuated from Sudan, particularly to do with Nigeria, it's the case, definitely, that under international law, when we have a war situation like this, the international rules and regulations to do with refugees would definitely apply to this kind of situation. And when people are fleeing a war zone, the neighboring countries should do as best as they can to at least accommodate the refugees until they are then eventually, evacuated to their various countries of origin. But it seems that in this instance, in this situation, that's not been happening at all. Countries like Egypt, I think Ethiopia, are making it so difficult for instance, Nigerians to have a safe passage through their countries, which indeed is in breach of international law. They should not be doing this at all, because the international law applies to every single country when we have a situation like a state of war. So indeed, I'm a little bit concerned that Nigerians and so many other nationals are quite stranded, and it seems that countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and to some extent I think Kenya is a little bit friendly, but countries like Ethiopia and Egypt, they seem to be making life so difficult, not allowing particularly Nigerians to actually have that safe passage. It's not right, it's not proper at all. So indeed, I'm concerned, and I hope that things actually get better.
One wonders how we got here in the first place, especially seeing as we are all Africans on the continent. But we've looked at some of the conditions and guidelines from Egypt, detailed schedule of the aircraft, strong pledge that once our citizens depart the border, they'll be conveyed directly to designated airport, a comprehensive list of evacuees. I mean, these are normal, aren't they, when it comes to this kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a normal situation when it comes to this type of situation. This should be normal. Rules should be followed, procedures should be followed. And we should also take on board the fact that the hosting countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and others, they need to be very, very clear in terms of what they need to put in place to be able to evacuate many of the people stranded. So yes, that's normal. But in this instance, I'm aware of the fact that there are still so many Nigerians, so many other African nationals who continue to complain that, well, it seems Egypt is promising that they are doing their best to at least evacuate as many people as possible. But it seems nothing is actually happening. There are students in Sudan who have, again, not been able to even get out of Sudan. And the ones who have managed to escape to countries like Egypt, they also seem to still be stranded. So that's the case. I also appreciate the fact that a country like Ethiopia, Ethiopia is a country with their own security challenges, and it's this case that they could be a little bit concerned of so many other nationals now going to their country, trying to actually escape the war-torn zone in Sudan. They could be a little bit concerned about their security situation, their safety, because they also have very, very serious security challenges in that country. But notwithstanding, the international law is international law to do with refugees. In any war-torn zone, countries surrounding that very, very particular country in a state of war should do all they could in terms of doing what they have to do to,
Mr. Fadina,
to allow. Yes.
I was just going to say in 30 seconds, what do you think, or what do you see the Nigerian government, what do you advise them doing? And this is after, of course, we've brought everyone home with regards to some of these reactions we've gotten from neighboring countries.
Well, my strong advice to the Nigerian government, I'm not sure of how much efforts they put into evacuating the majority of Nigerians in Sudan and the ones now stranded in Egypt and other countries. But my strong advice is this. If it's the case that that countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and one or two other countries are still being a little bit difficult in doing what they need to do to ensure safe passage of Nigerian citizens, the government should be doing all it could to, if it possibly, get in touch with the international community, the UN, the international body, guiding and protecting refugees, and make them understand the fact that things have not been done properly, and that we need our citizens out of Sudan ASAP, and the fact that they also need that safe passage through countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, and all the other countries, so we could indeed lift all our citizens back to Nigeria.
We want to appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, away from the situation in Sudan, back home here, President Muhammadu Buhari received the former Minister for Niger Delta, Senator Godswill Akpabio, at the presidential villa, where he presented his certificate of return to the president. Senator Akpabio says he engaged President Buhari about his interest to become President of Senate of the 10th National Assembly and what he plans to bring on board if elected. Well, you've been served lunch this day. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.